Ice cream maker Ben & Jerry's is stopping the sale of its products in the occupied Palestinian territories. The company had hoped to use its presence in the region to drive positive change, but now it says continuing operations in the region is inconsistent with its values. While the decision has been welcomed by pro-Palestinian activists, it's drawn an angry response from Israel, which is warning the parent company Unilever of severe consequences. Mobin Nasir reports.
Ben & Jerry's is giving Israel's government the cold shoulder over its treatment of Palestinians. The company is going to stop selling products in territories illegally occupied by Israel, saying it's inconsistent with Ben & Jerry's values. The ice cream maker has also recognized the concerns raised by its customers and partners. The statement has been welcomed by the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which calls on consumers to avoid brands that support and benefit from the Israeli occupation.
This announcement is so important and comes after years of pressure on the company to end its involvement in the Israeli violation of international law and Palestinian rights. We welcome this decision and urge the company to end all its dealings with apartheid Israel.
The Bds Movement is also calling for the boycotting of other brands like Volvo, Hewlett-Packard and Intel. The Swedish luxury vehicle manufacturer supplies equipment used to bulldoze Palestinian homes to make way for Israeli settlements, as well as the buses used to transport Palestinian prisoners to Israeli jails. IT giant Hewlett-Packard provides the biometric technology used at Israeli checkpoints, and computer chip maker Intel operates a factory in Kiryat Gat, a site of two former Palestinian villages. However, Ben & Jerry's announcement has received a frosty reception from its local partner in Israel, who says the suspension of sales is illegal.
I refuse it. Number one, legally in Israel, you cannot stop selling or decide not to sell to a customer. It doesn't matter if the customer is in Tel Aviv or in Haifa. So legally I cannot do it, and as an Israeli, and as a manufacturer and company that lives here, there's no way I can say no to Israeli citizens.
Ben & Jerry's decision is disgraceful capitulation to anti-Semitism, to BDS and to all that is evil in the anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish discourse. We won't be silent. More than 30 states in the US have passed an anti-BDS legislation in recent years. I plan on asking each of them to enforce these laws against Ben & Jerry's so that they won't treat us like this.
In the past, short-term rentals provider Airbnb, British consumer advocacy platform The Cooperative Group, and other companies have been charged under US anti-boycott laws. Now, with Ben & Jerry's facing similar prospects, it seems relations between the ice cream maker and Israel are unlikely to thaw anytime soon. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, let's get more on this now with Ali Abunimah in Chicago. He's the director of the Electronic Intifada, which is an independent publication about Palestine, and the author of The Battle for Justice in Palestine. Great to have you back on the program, Ali. Now, it might seem like a relatively small gesture, the stopping of the sale of an ice cream in the occupied Palestinian territories, but what does it mean to you, and why is it significant for the Palestinian cause?
Well, by itself, it could look small, but you have to see it in a bigger context, and that helps to understand the uh, outlandish reaction by Israeli leaders accusing an ice cream company of anti-Semitism and vowing to demand that states across the United States prosecute this ice cream maker. What Israel is afraid of is that more and more companies will follow the lead of Ben & Jerry's and others that have already pulled out of the occupied West Bank, and that Israel will really start to pay a significant price for its regime of occupation, apartheid, and settler colonialism. This decision by Ben & Jerry's comes just a couple of weeks after KLP, one of Norway's biggest pension funds, divested from 16 Israeli and multinational companies because of their involvement in Israel's illegal settlements and colonization in the West Bank. So Israel is hoping to stop, pardon the pun, a snowball effect uh, because of the action by Ben & Jerry's. And because, of course, Ben & Jerry's is a very popular brand. Most people in the world haven't heard of a Norwegian pension fund, but lots and lots of people eat and love Ben & Jerry's. So this is a disastrous headline for Israel, and that's why they hope to try to stop it. But I think they're simply digging in deeper by going on these unhinged rants against the ice cream maker.
Yes, and it is worth noting that amid the claims of anti-Semitism from the Israeli government, that Ben & Jerry's founders, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, are themselves Jewish. But this is also being held as a victory for the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which has called for a complete boycott of Israel over its treatment of Palestinians. Tell us more about the BDS movement and why you think it is an effective way to spark change in terms of Israeli policy?
Yeah, it's really very simple. I think almost everyone in the world understands that Israel is an occupying power. It's now pretty much a consensus that Israel operates a regime of apartheid against Palestinians. Recently, Human Rights Watch, one of the world's best-known human rights groups, came to that conclusion. In January, B'Tselem, one of Israel's most celebrated human rights groups, came to the conclusion also that Israel operates a regime of apartheid, not just in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, but throughout the whole country. It operates a regime of, to use B'Tselem's words, Jewish supremacy that subjects Palestinians, millions of Palestinians, to various forms of dehumanizing and degrading treatment and abuse. So the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, the logic of it is very simple. It says that, where you have an outlaw regime like this that refuses to respect people's rights, then it is legitimate and effective for people around the world to help to redress the balance by applying nonviolent pressure in the form of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And there are so many precedents for this. Of course, one of the best known is during the 1980s when there was a global boycott of apartheid South Africa, which helped end the oppressive white supremacist regime in that country. And of course, boycott has a long history in the civil rights movement in the United States, where boycotts were used to help to bring pressure for Black Americans to have full civil rights. So it's a very legitimate and well-known tactic. By the way, the anti-BDS laws that Yair Lapid, the alternate Israeli prime minister, said he wanted enforced, every time they've been tested in court in the United States, they've been found to be unconstitutional. There have now been several cases in federal courts in the United States over these laws. And the courts have ruled that, U.S. governments and U.S. legislatures, whether it's the federal government or the states, don't have the right to enforce political opinions on U.S. Citizens. So as an ordinary citizen or consumer, you have the right to buy or not buy Ben & Jerry's. I suspect that there will be supporters of Israel who now choose not to buy Ben & Jerry's, and that's their right. No one can argue with them. But also, Ben & Jerry's as a corporation has the right to say, we don't want to have anything to do with Israel's crimes against Palestinians.
Ali Abunimah, we will have to leave it there, but it's always great to get your analysis. Thank you again for joining us on Money Talks.